Yo, Adam Monk here. Yo, who the hell do I think I am? Hello guys, Adam Monk here and welcome to another Friday show. That was more like it, better intro there. Another Friday show, and this time obviously we preview an underdog who can beat a favourite for a game. This time we're going to the magic of the FA Cup. Of course, the catchphrase, the magic of the FA Cup, gets its name from underdogs beating favourites, much like we're going to cover in this video. So you might remember in 2010, Leeds United won at Old Trafford, Jermaine Beckford scored the winner, or for instance when Wigan Athletic won the FA Cup final against Manchester City, or when Tottenham Hotspur actually won the trophy in 1991.
It's been 84 years.
That was a bit of a cheap shot there, I'll admit. But nonetheless, I thought we'd turn our attention to the FA Cup this weekend, as there's some big games being played. I didn't want to focus on United v Liverpool though, as I tried to do a video on how Manchester United could feasibly beat Manchester City a couple of weeks ago. And, well, how did that go, you ask? Yeah, not good. So this time I thought we'd try and see how a different United team, namely Newcastle United, can try and have a pop at Manchester City this time and feasibly win at the Etihad Stadium. So here goes nothing. Well, the logical place to start will be to look at the last game which they played together, which Manchester City won 3-2. And no, I'm not going to look at the Carabao Cup game, which Newcastle won 1-0 at all. And that's not because I'm an ignorant City fan and want to avoid that game. That's actually because Rodri didn't play. Calvin Phillips played instead. And at the moment, whether he actually can be qualified as a footballer is largely up for debate. The 6 is a very important position on the pitch, and Rodri is the best in the world in that position. So let's focus on when City last played with Rodri, which was in January when they won 3-2 at St James's Park. Now the stats are actually quite telling in this game. 12 shots and 5 on target with 27% of the ball is not bad by any means. But more interestingly, if you take a look at this graph here, thanks to Opta Analyst, you can actually see that Newcastle scored their 2 goals, albeit 2 minutes apart, but when Manchester City were deemed more threatening in the game. So obviously you could read into this in a multitude of ways. You could say that the crowd were lifted after the first goal and they got a second one off the back of that, which does happen. But 2 goals so close together when City were deemed more threatening would tell a story that they've kind of scored them out of nothing. And that would be exactly right. Newcastle did in fact score 2 goals out of nothing, and that could paint a picture of how they could potentially get at Manchester City in this game, because they were still nonetheless goals that were scored in transition, but they were counter-attacks and very much 1v1 goals. So let's take a look at them. You can see here clearly Newcastle have possession of the ball with very little pressure on them on the right-hand side of the pitch in that right-back position, and they pop a very simple ball into the middle of the park to Bruno Guimaraes, if I've said that right. Let's just go with Bruno G, but nonetheless, Bruno G doesn't even take a touch when this ball's put into him. He leathers it into space down Kyle Walker's right-hand side towards Alexander Isak. Then instantly, what have you got? Well, you've got a 1v1 situation against the fastest right-back in world football, or one of them at least, and definitely probably the strongest. And Isak gets the better of Walker, cuts inside, and buries one with an absolutely beautiful finish. So it's a goal out of nothing, it's a goal in transition, but it's a 1v1 goal, and a goal that's built on individual quality nonetheless. I need to stop saying nonetheless in this video. I've said it already about 5 times, so I will try that. Anyway, nonetheless, the second goal. The ball is falling down from the northeastern sky, and Ruben Diaz slightly miscontrols it, meaning there's a 1v1 kind of duel to win the ball that Isak comes out on top of. This loose ball, which was scrappily won, has poked the ball into an area which can allow Newcastle to quickly transition, which is exactly what Dan Burn looks to do. He pops it again into Kyle Walker's channel down that right-hand side. Now, I'm not going to lie, as a City fan, I'm not quite sure what Kyle Walker did here. He decided to kind of jog and then sprint and jog and do a bit of Barclays walking football. He didn't exactly screen Gordon to the best of his ability, I would say, on this instance. But again, for the second time in 2 minutes in quick succession, a Newcastle player cuts in on Walker's left-hand side, and this time bends another unsavable shot past Ortega. This one really is a thing of beauty. Could have perhaps been defended better, but again, a very individualistic 1v1 goal where a winger or a striker is taken on a defender, beat him, and put it into the back of the net. It sounds very simple in those terms, but really these are goals that are founded on individual quality, and that's how Newcastle are going to have to look to hurt Manchester City, because they've got the players to do it. Or do they, because Anthony Gordon is actually now injured after Newcastle's game at Stamford Bridge, adding to the list of 57 million other players who are out. So let's just have a look at their injury list very briefly and somewhat morbidly. Tonali, of course, suspended, Callum Wilson, Joe Linton, Nick Pope, Kieran Trippier, Lewis Hall, Harvey Barnes, Dan Burn, and now Anthony Gordon. You don't need me to tell you that that is an awful lot of first-team players, meaning Eddie Howe's kind of got his hands tied behind his back at the moment, and he's having a very difficult time of things. He's getting a few results, but to win at the Etihad is a massive ask, and it's likely, especially with Harvey Barnes and Gordon injured, who are the outlets on that left-hand side, it's going to force his hand to play basically a bank of 9 or 10 and use his secret or well, not so secret weapon. And that weapon is obviously Alexander Isak. Thanks to understat.com, you can here see Isak's goals from open play only in the last 2 seasons, and there's a very, very nice variation here. Of course, as you'd expect, the majority of them come in and around the 6-yard box and the penalty area, but there's a nice variation of 3 from outside the box there and a few from wide positions in the penalty area. In short, he's not afraid to have a pop from anywhere, and it's particularly impressive when you consider how Eddie Howe sets up anyway, but also how his hand has almost been forced to set up so defensively this season. Isak basically feeds off scraps, and it's pure testament to his ability, the variety of goals that this lad can score. And just to look at a couple of his goals that typify this, I mean, we can whiz through this one, it's the Man City goal again, but again, a goal that's fed off a scrap, a long ball, and he's 1v1 against a defender, and yet again finishes it from the edge of the penalty area in stylish fashion, really. But it's this one for me at Stamford Bridge on Monday night that's the most impressive of the season so far, I think. Truth be told here, it's a half-assed attempt to clear it from Chelsea, and Newcastle win a scrappy ball, much like they did in the Anthony Gordon goal against Manchester City. Once they've won that scrappy ball, they immediately pop it off to an outlet, usually Isak or Gordon on the left-hand side. It gets popped into Isak here, and wallop. Basically, Isak just plays off pure instinct. He don't really need to think twice, and that's why he's so good. When he gets a sniff of goal or he sees a gap open up, whether that's around a defender or the keeper's mispositioning, he's got the ability on both feet, and with composure as well from outside the box, to just almost side foot it where he pleases into the net. And in that sense, to be honest, he kind of reminds me, and I don't think I'm tempting fate or exaggerating here, the way that he finishes and opens his body up, he reminds me a lot of Thierry Henry. So I think Newcastle's best bet is to try and nab the ball in midfield or go long to Isak and find him in those channels, and then hope that he's got the 1v1 ability to beat the likes of Diaz and Walker, who are a bit more susceptible to being dribbled past. And look, you can see here this season in the Premier League, he's got 60.47 take-on success percentage, with 26 successful dribbles and 17 unsuccessful. And for Isak, who's like 6'2" and is quite gangly and sometimes looks languid in the way he dribbles, that's not a bad return at all. You know, we're not talking about Eden Hazard here or Messi. We're talking about a striker who's built like a target man and should be leading the line. That is a pretty damningly good dribble success rate for a player of his size. Anyway, that is enough of me talking. Let's talk to a Newcastle fan who no doubt knows more about the club than me, because after all, I'm just an ignorant City fan who supported him since 2008. And that Newcastle fan is Charlotte Robson from the True Faith Newcastle podcast. You can check that out if you're a Newcastle fan. She's given her thoughts on how she thinks Newcastle can perhaps win at the Etihad Stadium. So, take it away. So we're doing this week, how can Newcastle feasibly beat Manchester City and progress? Is there any way, it's an open-ended question, but is there any way that you think Newcastle might be able to pull a rabbit out the hat?
Do I think Newcastle can pull a rabbit out the hat this weekend against City? I think stranger things have happened, but it's going to be a big ask. It is a big ask. We performed pretty poorly against Chelsea and picked up some injuries to our key players. One of the things that I would hope to use against Man City is some of our pacey players to kind of get into spots that we might, maybe exploit a little bit of space if we can get into it. But we've lost Anthony Gordon to a knee injury now, and I just think the other players, that the confidence doesn't look like it's there. So it's a really tricky one, because my head and my heart are saying that Man City are going to be pretty comfortable on Saturday. However, we have beaten Man City, albeit at home, this season, so it's not completely impossible that we. There
was no Rodri that day, though.
Yes, yeah, it was a limited Man City, yeah. And I don't imagine that they'll be limited. They've got this far in the cup. It's very important to them now to progress. But from our side, I suppose the only thing that might kind of galvanize us is that the cup kind of is the savior of our season, if you will, because we're not doing particularly well. We're sitting at 10th at time of recording, and we're out of the Champions League. We're not in any kind of European competition. We're not in the League Cup obviously anymore. So this is all we've got really to kind of salvage our season a little bit. So maybe that will galvanize our players, and maybe they'll be able to pull a spectacular performance out of the bag.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in terms of like individual players, I mean, I'm a Man City fan, just in case you didn't know. So like I struggle, because usually these videos that we do on the Friday show, it's how can another team beat my team? And it's often very hard to kind of think of the reasons, but one of the main reasons that I could conjure up thinking about it, and particularly referencing last night at Stamford Bridge actually as well, is Alexander Isak. I think he's a phenomenal player. He's world class in my opinion. But the thing that he does better than most players in the league for me is feed off scraps, really. He doesn't get, particularly because of the injuries that Newcastle have got, he doesn't get an awful lot of service at the moment. And you look at the goal that he scored at Chelsea last night, phenomenal finish. He scored one against City in the league that was almost out of nothing, really, 1v1 against Walker. Could he be the key to perhaps, you know, unlocking City's defence and maybe helping Newcastle win the game?
Yeah, if any players are going to cause bother to City, I think that they are Alexander Isak and Bruno Guimaraes. Those are our two sort of world-class footballers that are going to be on the pitch on Saturday night, and are the ones that can create from very little. In particular, Isak, he just dances with the ball. He can put it through legs. He can dance around players. The issue is going to be getting it to him. And I know that, you know, it was last time we played Man City, you kind of crowded our midfield and we couldn't get a lot through. And that is going to be, I imagine, our weak spot again this Saturday. So it's a difficult one. But yes, if there is going to be any player that I would imagine can create something from very little, it's going to be Isak, because he has an excellent strike on him. He can strike, as we saw at Chelsea, from very far away, and with incredible accuracy, and he can also pick up the ball from quite deep and move it up the pitch quite quickly. Whether or not he's going to be allowed to do that by Man City, I imagine, and I don't want to you know, jump ahead of myself in sort of punditry, but I think Pep Guardiola probably knows that. So I think he's probably preparing for that. Yeah, so I think Guardiola obviously is one of the best managers in the world, and I imagine he is preparing for that being our only outlet. But yes, I think we'll see some flair from Isak. Whether or not it'll be enough to break City down and score more goals, I'm a little skeptical about that, but he's always a joy to watch. So
final question then, score prediction.
Oh, score prediction.
Be positive, go on. It's a Newcastle positive video. You're allowed to say, I'm going to have to predict why Newcastle can win. So
okay. I think we often pull out good performances after bad performances. And against Chelsea, we had a bad performance. So I think for some reason, the stars are going to align. Everything's going to click. The players are going to look like they know each other on a personal level, which they haven't for a little while. And I think it's going to be a scrappy 2-1 to Newcastle.
2-1,
a very last minute second goal to seal the deal, and everybody's going to party like we've won the cup.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you guys for watching the video. I would say that we're going to be back next week with this, but obviously this video is kind of like how an underdog can win a game, and we've got an international break next. So I don't know if I can do a video on how Malta can beat Portugal, because, you know, what's the point in that? Nonetheless, so do not forget to subscribe. Hope you have a lovely day or evening. I've been Adam Monk. Take care. I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.